Hello everyone, today I am reading about fallacies and what are their types. You can treat it like a audiobook about fallacies. So let's start. A fallacy is the use of invalid or otherwise faulty reasoning in the construction of an argument. And all the forms of human communication can contain fallacies. So there are mainly two classifications of fallacies. First is based on structure, which is called formal fallacies, and second is based on content, which is called informal fallacies. Informal fallacies have different categories such as improper presumption, faulty generalization, error in assigning causation, relevance, and many more. Formal fallacies. A formal fallacy is an error in the argument's form. First, appeal to probability, taking something for granted because it would probably be the case. Second, argument from fallacy, also known as fallacy. The assumption that if a particular argument for a conclusion is fallacious, then the conclusion by itself is false. Third, base rate fallacy, making a probability judgment based on conditional probabilities without taking into account the effect of prior probabilities. Fourth, conjunction fallacy, the assumption that an outcome simultaneously satisfying multiple conditions is more probable than an outcome satisfying a single one of them. Fifth, non sequitur fallacy, where the conclusion does not logically follow the premise. Masked man fallacy, illicit substitution of identicals. The substitution of identical designators in a true statement can lead to a false one. Propositional fallacies. A propositional fallacy is an error that concerns compound propositions. For a compound proposition to be true, the truth values of its constituent parts must satisfy the relevant logical connections that occur in it. Most commonly and or not, only if and only if. So there are three kind of propositional fallacies in this PDF. First, affirming a disjunct, concluding that one disjunct of a logical disjunction must be false because the other disjunct is true. So A or B, A therefore not B. Second, affirming the consequent. The antecedent in an indicative conditional is claimed to be true because the consequent is true. If A, then B. B, therefore A. Third, denying the antecedent. The consequent in an indicative conditional is claimed to be false because the antecedent is false. If A, then B. Not A, therefore not B. Now, quantification fallacies. A quantification fallacy is an error in logic where the quantifiers of the premises are in contradiction to the quantifier of the conclusion. So there is one given, existential fallacy, an argument that has a universal premise and a particular conclusion. Formal syllogistic fallacies. These are the logical fallacies that occur in syllogism. Affirmative conclusion from a negative premise, illicit negative. A categorical syllogism has a positive conclusion but at least one negative premise. Fallacy of exclusive premises. A categorical syllogism that is invalid because both of its premises are negative. Fallacy of four terms. Quaternio terminorum. A categorical syllogism that has four terms. Illicit major. A categorical syllogism that is invalid because its major term is not distributed in the major premise but distributed in the conclusion. Illicit minor. A categorical syllogism that is invalid because its minor term is not distributed in the minor premise but distributed in the conclusion. Negative conclusion from affirmative premises. Illicit affirmative. A categorical syllogism has a negative conclusion but affirmative premises. Fallacy of the undistributed middle. The middle term in the categorical syllogism is not distributed. Fallacy. Modal fallacy. Confusing necessity with sufficiency. A condition X is necessary for Y if X is required for even the possibility of Y. X does not bring about Y by itself, but if there is no X, there will be no Y. For example, oxygen is necessary for fire, but one cannot assume that everywhere there is oxygen, there is fire. A condition X is sufficient for Y if X by itself is enough to bring about Y. For example, riding a bus is a sufficient mode of transportation to get to work, but there are other modes of transportation: car, taxi, bicycle, etc. Modal scope fallacy. A degree of unwarranted necessity is placed in the conclusion. Informal fallacies. Arguments that are logically unsound for lack of well grounded premises. Argument from incredulity. When someone cannot imagine something to be true and therefore deems it false, or conversely holds that it must be true because they cannot see how it could be false. Second, argument to moderation. False compromise, middle ground, fallacy of the mean. Argumentum ad temperantium. Assuming that a compromise between two positions is always correct. Third, continuum fallacy. Fallacy of the beard, line draw fallacies, Sorites fallacy, fallacy of the heap, bald man fallacy, decision point fallacy. Improperly rejecting a claim for being imprecise. Fourth, correlative based fallacies. Under that one is given suppressed correlative. A correlative is redefined so that one alternative is made impossible. Example, I am not fat because I am thinner than John. Fifth, divine fallacy. Argument from incredulity. Arguing that because something is so phenomenal or amazing, it must be the result of superior, divine, alien, or paranormal agency. Sixth, double counting. Counting events or occurrences more than once in probabilistic reasoning, which leads to the sum of the probabilities of all cases exceeding unity. Equivocation. Using a term with more than one meaning in a statement without specifying which meaning is intended. Many fallacy examples are given. Ambiguous middle term. Using a middle term with multiple meanings. Definitional retreat. Changing the meaning of a word when an objection is raised, often paired with moving the goalpost, as when an argument is challenged using a common definition of a term in the argument, the arguer presents a different definition of the term and thereby demands different evidence to debunk the argument. Motte and Bailey fallacy. Conflating two positions with similar properties, one modest and easy to defend, the Motte, and one more controversial, the Bailey. The arguer first states the controversial position, but when challenged, states that they are advancing the modest position. Fallacy of accent. Changing the meaning of a statement by not specifying on which word emphasis falls. Persuasive definition. Purporting the use of true or commonly accepted meaning of a term while in reality using as an uncommon or altered definition. Other fallacies under the informal fallacy. Ecological fallacy. Inferring about the nature of an entity based solely upon aggregate statistics collected for the group to which the entity belongs. Ninth, etymological fallacy. Assuming that the original or historical meaning of a word or phrase is necessarily similar to its actual present day uses. 10th, fallacy of composition. Assuming that something true of the part of a whole must be true of the whole. 11th, fallacy of division. Assuming that something true of a composite thing must also be true of all or some of its parts. 12th, false attribution. Appealing to an irrelevant, unqualified unidentified, biased, or fabricated source in support of an argument. False authority. Single authority. Using an expert of dubious credentials or using only one opinion to promote a product or idea. False dilemma. False dichotomy, fallacy of bifurcation, black or white fallacy. Two alternative statements are given as the only possible options when in reality there are more. False equivalence, describing two or more statements as virtually equal when they are not. Feedback fallacy, believing in the objectivity of an evaluation to be used as the basis of improvement without verifying that the source of the evaluation is a disinterested party. Historian's fallacy, assuming that the decision makers of the past had identical information as those subsequently analyzing the decision. This is not to be confused with the presentism, in which present day ideas and perspectives are anachronistically projected into the past. Historical fallacy, believing that certain results occurred only because a specific process was performed, though said process may actually be unrelated to the results. Inflation of conflict, arguing that if experts in a field of knowledge disagree on a certain point within that field, no conclusion can be reached, or that the legitimacy of that field of knowledge is questionable. If by whiskey, an argument that supports both sides of an issue by using terms that are emotionally sensitive and ambiguous. Intentionality fallacy, the insistence that the ultimate meaning of an expression must be consistent with the intention of the person from whom the communication originated. A work of fiction that is widely received as a blatant allegory must necessarily not be regarded as such if the author intended it not to be so. Cattle logic, using multiple jointly inconsistent arguments to defend a position. Mind projection fallacy, assuming that a statement about an object describes an inherent property of the object rather than a personal perception. Moralistic fallacy, inferring factual conclusions from evaluative premises in violation of fact value distinction. Inferring is from ought. Moralistic fallacy is the inverse of naturalistic fallacy. Moving the goalpost, raising the bar, argument in which evidence presented in response to a specific claim is dismissed and some other, often greater, evidence is demanded.